For the season of Lent, I have decided to preach a series of sermons loosely based on Ecclesiastes 3, the first verse. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. And my text for this week is to be a time to keep silence and a time to speak. I must admit, having done the bulletin on Tuesday, and having picked the psalm then, I had very different thoughts in mind for the sermon that I would deliver this morning. But given the week that is behind us, that's all in the trash. It has been a week. Last Sunday, 157 people perished on an Ethiopian Airlines flight. And we found out this week that the cause of the crash most likely was a software problem that Boeing has known about, and they have been negotiating with the Trump administration for additional time to fix it. They've known it since the crash in Indonesia. Every nation across the globe immediately grounded the airliner, but it took a lot of pressure for our government to do the same, and to put pressure on Boeing to do the right thing and to fix the problem. Then our government announces what the federal budget will be this week. And the predictable response to budget deficits is to use scarcity as a problem. We don't have enough. Therefore, we need to cut the social safety net. So that's Social Security, Medicare, the National Science Foundation, and education funding are slated for enormous cuts. Heaven forbid we ask those who have much to actually pay their fair share in taxes, or that we ask the corporations headquartered and making money in this economy to pay their share of taxes. And then we had the announcement of the indictments in the nationwide college admissions scandal. Actresses and corporate CEOs, wealthy individuals, laid bare the amounts of money they were willing to pay to make sure their children made it into elite colleges. A court in Connecticut finally ruled that the gunmaker Remington could be sued over the Newtown shooting. Justice delayed is justice denied, someone once said. On Wednesday, we heard news of a school shooting in Brazil, and then we were all jarred on Friday with the word from New Zealand that at 2 mosques in Christchurch, one gunman, driven by absolute hatred, had killed at least 49, and I believe as of this morning the death count is now either 51 or 52. The gunman was a white supremacist, a nativist. He was at least taken alive and could be made and held accountable for what he did, but was absolutely galling for me was listening to the response of some of our politicians and supposed leaders in the United States and in Australia, blaming everything and everyone but the culprit for the problem. There's a time to keep silence, and there's a time to speak. The psalm that we read this morning talks about my heart burned within me, and I didn't want to sing with my mouth. The conventional interpretation of Psalm 39 is that it is a person at the end of their life facing death, pleading with God, looking back and wondering where that person stands. There is one interpretation that says the psalm breaks off in despair and it's plunged into darkness, a darkness without parallel. Turn your face from me that I may go hence, it says in the King James Version, before I go hence and am no more. God, turn away from me. Don't shine your presence on me. And then there's another interpretation that says actually the psalm is the product of a mature spiritual reflection. And that the psalmist, after many years, has finally gained his perspective, or her perspective. And that human life is transitory. It's fleeting. It's brief. It's short. It's unpredictable. But the psalmist now is willing to face death with calmness. And then Robert Alter says that the speaker of the psalm flounders in a world of radical ambiguities. That the psalm really is holding in tension both despair and hope, simultaneously seeing the trouble around the psalmist, and at the same time being willing to put trust in God. It speaks of life as it truly is, terrifyingly short, yet awesomely wonderful at times. And the psalm holds in tension the reality that is often our response to life. We view life with hopeful awe at moments, and at other moments, such as Friday, we look at it with unspeakable despair, saying, "Where is God?" But the psalm covers three different themes: silence, and our ability, or lack thereof, to keep silence at times; the brevity of our life, and the effects of sin and its suffering. I think the psalm also gives us language in a week like this, to be able to understand and to know and to acknowledge there are some things we have no control over. But then there are things that we do, our actions. There are times the church is silent. There are many times when the church as an institution is silent and should not be. And living in the day and age where we are, sometimes it's hard to keep our mouths shut. Last week I spoke about Deuteronomy and the requirement of us that when we give offering to God, when we acknowledge God for the blessings that were given, when we bring them to God, that we are to use the confession, our ancestor was a wandering Aramean. We were aliens in the land of Egypt, is what the people of Israel say. They remind themselves where they come from. And in this psalm, when the speaker is talking about how short and brief life is and how wandering the journey through life can be, it's a reminder to us that we are not guaranteed tomorrow. We are not guaranteed to live to 80 or 90 years old. But then there are those who feel it is their right, I hate to use that word, but they feel they can determine who deserves to live and who doesn't deserve to live. Let's not keep silent any longer on the cause of the violence this week. It is a sin, as Professor Janine Hill-Fletcher said to us, of white supremacy. It is not unique to this country. It has been part of who we are. It has been part of us since our founding. This year will be the 400th anniversary of the bringing of Africans over to these shores in slavery. And from that moment on, this country has not been able to acknowledge that those people, people of color, people of African descent, are as worthy as human beings as we are. I was reading yesterday a column by an African-American pastor, and she asked, what will those of my colleagues who serve white majority congregations tell their congregations tomorrow? And it's a question that we have to ask ourselves. It's a question that we need to think about. 2 years ago during Lent, we did a series on white privilege. Last year, we had a series of conversations on racism. That has not solved the problem. In fact, in our country today, if we acknowledge where we are, given the current administration, and I'm going to call it what it is an administration that is doing everything it can to block people who are either people of color or who are Muslim of a different faith from entering this nation. It is not an accident that the shooter in Pittsburgh or the shooter in New Zealand both reference our president and his attitude. And while he said this was a horrible crime, he then moved on to say the exact same things that could be found in the shooter's manifesto. Keep these people out of our country. We need to not trust anyone. My dear friends, all of us are children of God. Every human being born has been born imago Dei, in the image and likeness of God. All of us. That means none of us is any better than anyone else. That means all of us deserve an opportunity. All of us deserve life. Not if I'm wealthy, then I can afford to pay tens of thousands of dollars for a consultant who will fake my child's college application. Not because I'm a person of color that I should be excluded from certain institutions or certain jobs. There should be no difference between us, my friends. And it's about time we learn to acknowledge who and whose we are. Or the despair that we feel when the news happens of a shooting somewhere or some other event goes on, it will continue. The season of Lent is a time for renewal. There is a time for us to keep silent. There's a time for us to hold our hand over our mouth and not say anything. But then there are times when we need to speak out. Or as Jesus said, if we don't, even the rocks will condemn us for not speaking out, for not acting to stop this. If we claim to be a land of the free and the home of the brave, it is time for us. It is required of each and every one of us to no longer be silent, but to speak out and to hold our leaders, our president and his cabinet, our senators, our congressmen, our governor, our state assemblymen, our state senators, our county executive, our county freeholders, our mayor, and our borough council. It's time to hold them all accountable. Jesus taught us that there were two main things, two main rules that we had to follow. We have to love God above all and our neighbor as ourselves. It is that simple. It is that complex. And in this season of Lent, time for us to go back and search the scriptures. I know there are many who want to try and dismiss what's happening and just call it partisan politics. Bull. It's not. And if you think it is, you need to re-examine yourself. Because this is in no way what we have been called to be. If we want to say we're a Christian nation, let's act like it. There was a meme that was posted on Facebook this week that was about Richard Rohr saying that Christianity is about a certain lifestyle, loving and caring for each other and calm. But we have claimed the name of Christian, but forgotten to act in accordance with what that man taught us. And instead, what's more important to us is war. What is important to us is money. What is important to us is power. What is important to us is things, material things that we try to keep our control over. And when we can't control that, we lash out and use the power that we have as a nation to destroy anyone that stands in our way. We also act that way in church sometimes. If we can't control what happens, if we don't like what's going on, we'll do what we can to disrupt it and turn it upside down and not support it and to pull it down. My friends, that's not what we're asked to do. That's not who we profess to be. I put this, I believe, as our reading for this week before all of this went on. But it is what we're required to do. Whether you turn to the affirmations of faith in the back of our hymnal and read through them, or whether you believe something in the words of a youth group from Peru, this is what it means to be Christian in this world. There is, as the Prime Minister in New Zealand said, there is no place for that type of behavior in our world, in New Zealand, in the United States, in our church. And if we think that's so, it's time for us to re-examine ourselves. There's a time and a purpose for every matter under heaven. There is a time to keep silent, and there is a time to speak out. My dear friends, we are required now to speak out. So speak. Let your life speak. Let your mouth speak. And together, let's walk down that road and hold each other and our leaders accountable. Amen.